So with the painting completed, we're now going to make the sleeve and the costume for the puppet. You need to make this this sleeve for your hand. Now you can dress over the top of that and change that, or you could just leave it plain. With this witch, you could leave it plain black, or if you've got a nice velvet material or something quite nice, you could do it that way. But either way, even if you're going to put a costume on, a more detailed costume, you need to make this sleeve first. It's better because you can have a sort of one-piece construction whereby you haven't got any seams to get in the way of your hand being in there. And also, if you get a nice material that's sort of kind on your arms and doesn't stick too much, because depending on the clothing that you're going to make for your puppet, you might have something that's a bit too heavy, or a bit too binding or grippy, or or even too smooth maybe. So make a sleeve first, and we've got the pattern on the site. You have to adjust that to your to the size of your puppet. Now, ideally, the length of the sleeve you want here is about 3 times the size of the head, but you could also think about it. You want it to cover most of your forearms. So if your arm's up the sleeve and you've got your hand in position, you really want it to come down almost down to the elbow if you can. So you can work out the sizing from that. You might want to adjust it, particularly if you're making it for a child. This would be much shorter, and the distance between the 2 hand points obviously needs to be shorter. I mean, that's okay for me, but if you're talking about a child's hand, then they'll probably need to be, much smaller in sort of that sort of position there. Now, with the pattern I've supplied, you've got to allow for stitching the 2 pieces together, so you've got to allow it slightly bigger than you want it, and also you need to put a hem on the ends here of the sleeves and the neck and the base to stop it fraying. So you do that first. Once you've cut your material to the pattern, do a hemline on here, 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 and here, and then you can sew the 2 pieces together. And of course, you sew the 2 pieces together, you put the good sides facing each other, and then you sew together and turn it inside out. But you'll see that as I do that. I'm going to do it on a sewing machine, but obviously you can do it by hand stitching if you want. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to remember. This distance here, again, you might need to adjust for your puppet. This measurement here corresponds to the circumference of the neck. So if you've got a flexible tape measure, you can just measure around your neck of your puppet and get a measurement on there. And mine's 17.5 centimeters as a tight fit, or 18 slightly loose. So as long as I've got 18 there, I should be all right at least. You can err on the side of being a bit bigger, and of course remember you've got to account for your hemline, and you're going to lose a bit when you sew them together as well. So allow a little bit extra on there, and you can always gather it in. You don't want to gather too much in. You don't want it to be too bulky around the neck, particularly if you're going to add things on afterwards. And the same here around the wrists. Make sure you've got enough material to cover around. It doesn't matter so much if they're gathered in particularly, but one thing I'm going to do as well, which is useful to do here, is with the, as you can see what I've done, with the wrist section here, I've added on this piece of leather to make a loop. So we've got the back of the hand, which is the brace for our finger, and then I've made this piece of leather here so that when my hand goes into the material, it'll keep its shape. With the material being smooth, it's going to want to collapse. This will hold a nice shape and make it very easy to get my finger into the right position, and it also allows me to pull on there without, if you had a thin material, your finger would be poking, you'd see your finger pushing the material. This sort of flattens it out. So I've used a bit of leather here. You could use some cardboard, or even perhaps some wire. You could bend around some wire, make the shape like that. Anything that really is just going to hold its shape. You could even use perhaps a small thick cardboard tube, or a bit of plastic. Just anything that will allow you to keep that shape and allow you to move the hand around. It's quite useful. So I've just cut a shape like this, so it tapers out, so it's bigger on the outside edge, and then I've just tacked it on to the hand, a couple of points there. So when that gets fixed on, as you can see, it sort of creates almost like a cone shape to get your finger into. So that one's already done. As you can see, I've just popped a couple of tacks in there. Just going to do this one, and then I'll cut the material out and we'll start working on that. So I just put this together. Now you can use any sort of, you could just glue these on if you wanted to. I'm just putting a couple of small pins in there, but any way that you find best to fix those on, you can do that. And then if you pin your pattern, so get the two pieces of material the same size, I've just about got enough on these bits, pin the pattern onto the material and then cut them both out at once if you can. If you've got a good pair of material scissors, you can do that. So just counter drilling first for my tacks. If they're smaller pieces, you might not need to do that. You might just be able to push them straight in, but I've just counter drilled the hole just to make it a little easier for them to go in. And I could just push them in, hopefully with some pliers. Nearly. Yeah, I'll get the other one located first, and then I'll push both those in. You can always just tap these in as well if you want to. Make sure they really sit home. Just tap them in with a small hammer. Let's get these side in. Okay, so that's that side done. So we've got our two hand sections there. So the next thing is to move on and have a look at this, cut out this material. Now I've already got a hem on the bottom here, so I'm going to utilise that. It's just about enough, it's a little bit tight. I can perhaps just go up a little bit and gain a bit. So with some dressmaking pins, we'll just attach the pattern to the material. This just will stop it moving about when you're cutting it and allow you to cut both at the same time. If you haven't got good enough scissors to do that, then you'll just have to do them separately, and you can always use chalk to draw around if you don't want to pin it on your material, but it's just as quick and easy to pin on, really. So with that in place, I can just cut around the shape as neatly as I can. You don't have to worry too much. I mean, you really want to try and be neat when you're cutting material, but because you're going to sew a seam anyway, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, but it's always best to, with everything you do, try and make it as good as you can. So a little bit short on the arm there maybe, but I don't think that's going to matter. It's just best to have a material, I find. I mean, you could use something like an old t-shirt if you wanted to, but they tend to crumple a little bit and can crease and that sort of thing, don't hang quite so well. So materials that sort of naturally hang straight, if you understand what I mean, are better. But if this is your, you know, if you're not going to overdress it with anything, then you've got to use a material that's, you know, that's nice to look at, rather than worrying about how well it's going to hang. But if this is just an inner sleeve, then it's always useful to have a nice sort of relatively solid material, a bit of strength to it. Just have to put another pin in there for a minute. Okay, so there we go. So I've cut out the two pieces. I'm going to set up the sewing machine next. Now obviously you can sew this by hand if you haven't got a sewing machine, or you can find someone who has got a sewing machine and they can show you how to use it, or you can ask them nicely to do it for you. First thing I'm going to do is sew a little hem into the ends here to stop these ends fraying. The ends of the sleeves and the end of the neck. This has already got one on anyway. I've got to tidy this side up, just match that up to that. So I'll do those first, and once I've done those, what I'm going to do is put the two pieces with the good sides. So you've got an inside and an outside. So put the two outsides facing together, and then sew the seam along here, this area, and then down here. Obviously you don't close up your sleeves or your neck area, so those are left. But I've got to set up the sewing machine to do that, and then we'll have a go at that. So there's our two pieces sewn together, and just tidy up the odd threads. A bit of a tidy up. But as you can see, that gives our piece. Now when you turn it inside out, or the right way around, as it will be, as it was inside out, that will give our tiny bit. So with our pieces turned the right way round, being inside out. That should give our sleeve where our puppet fits into. And we can attach the hands to the inside, and then we can costume over the top. So we've got this nice sleeve to get the arm in, and something to work over.